haven't played the game, what's going to do? Now, look, all you got to do, like, is when the whistle's blown, I want you to get one spin on the only ball.
Okay. So as everybody knows, this was the 50th anniversary of Sgt. Pepper, and we had big celebrations back in June and pretty much going on the whole year. We had the big box set, which I did my review on, the vinyl edition, 2 different CD editions, you know, all that sort of stuff. So it was great, and I loved it. And at the time, I jokingly had said to some friends, hey, since the Rolling Stones' Their Satanic Majesties request is supposed to be the Stones' answer to Sgt. Pepper, do you think the Stones are going to release an anniversary edition of Their Satanic Majesties request? I never thought it would happen. It was only meant to be a joke. Here it is. This is the limited edition, anniversary edition of Their Satanic Majesties request by the Rolling Stones. Here's my limited edition number. So it's a double CD, double vinyl set. The CDs also are hybrid super audio CDs. So if you still have your Sony SACD setup, you could hear it in extra high quality. And they recreated the lenticular 3D design, the first time in years. The original gatefold sleeve. Comes with a 20-page booklet too. Now, what do I think of this album? Much has been made about it. The Stones are still apologizing for it. Stones fans and Beatles fans like to rip on the album. Critics did. What do I think of the album? Now, I had to say that I am a Stones fan. You know, the Beatles are my huge obsession. Everybody knows it. But I am a Stones fan. Stones are one of my favorite bands. My relationship to the Stones is a bit more complicated nowadays. That's a different topic altogether. With what I feel they've become. But that's a different story. But back then, I felt the Stones could do no wrong up to 1978's album, Some Girls. But this album, that's often been considered a pale imitation of Sgt. Pepper, I like this album a lot. I think it was maligned for a lot of different reasons. A lot of people didn't expect the Stones to go psychedelic, so to speak. But all one has to do is take a look at the albums previous. All you have to do is take a look at Aftermath. All you have to do is take a look at Between the Buttons. And when I talk about those, I talk about the actual UK editions. And you have the singles of Paint It Black, Ruby Tuesday, Have You Seen Your Mother? And of course, Dandelion and We Love You, which have John and Paul on backing vocals. The Stones were headed down this route. After the album, and after the critics didn't like it, the Stones, you could say they retreated to safe waters. But even that classic period, beginning with Beggar's Banquet up to Goat's Head Soup, where Jimmy Miller was the producer and Mick Taylor became the guitarist by the time of Let It Bleed, which I think that's the masterpiece in my opinion. They still were adding some of the sonic textures that they experimented on this album with. Now, the Stones get so much flack for this album, but they weren't the only band to have an answer to Sgt. Pepper in that post-Pepper period between 67 and you could even say 69. In America, a lot of people were still trying to do a Pepper. But there were a number of bands that were doing their answer to Sgt. Pepper. Here's just a few of them. The Young Rascals became the Rascals with Once Upon a Dream. They had elaborate cover art as well, with a booklet inside the album, right here. A booklet of photos. It's got a Sgt. Pepper unifying theme, and a lot of Rascals fans consider that their best album. Some of these were directly or indirectly influenced by Pepper. The Byrds came out with the Notorious Byrd Brothers. Done over a 6-month period in '67, David Crosby appears on 50% of the album, but they fired him heading towards the end of the album, like around October '67, and they replaced him with a horse on the cover. But the album flows together. It's experimental, and a lot of people cite this as the Byrds' best album and the Byrds' most successful attempt at a pop art album. Jefferson Airplane with After Bathing at Baxter's, you know, maybe the fact that they spent a long time in the studio experimenting, and they organized each song into 5 loosely connected suites gives the impression that the album is a symphony. And After Bathing at Baxter's, what's the concept of the album? After Bathing at Baxter's means after dropping acid. And Simon and Garfunkel on bookends. A lot of people think that's the masterpiece. And they've even admitted that hearing what the Beatles did on Pepper was their excuse to play the studio as an instrument. So that's all the Stones were doing here. I mean, there's a lot of people that will argue that Satanic Majesties is more psychedelic than Sgt. Pepper. That's not my view. I think they're 2 totally separate albums. But I will say there is nothing on Sgt. Pepper that is remotely like 2,000 Light Years from Home, which I think is probably the best of the Stones going Technicolor. Yes, the opening track, Sing This All Together, with the hippy-dippy lyrics, which John and Paul also sing backup vocals on that. And it has a reprise, a la Sgt. Pepper, of Sing This All Together, but is done as an 8-minute freakout jam. Key moment on that is Jagger turning to whoever was there saying, "Where's that joint?" at the beginning of it. And of course the joint obviously kicks in, because then they're finally the actual reprise comes at the end of like 7 minutes of this cacophony. It could have been edited, actually. It goes on a bit too long. And maybe the album could have been sequenced a bit better, but I don't think it's a ripoff of Sgt. Pepper. And I really have wondered what would have happened if the critics actually liked this album. Maybe the Stones would have gone further and have been experimental. Instead, the Stones have apologized for this album ever since and have been saying that it was a crap album and we were in a confused period of our life. There's no need to apologize for it. It's a product of the times like everything else was. So I am a bit disappointed in the fact that there's no outtakes in this. There's a great bootleg that has come out, or that has been out. I forgot the name of it and I don't own it, but I've heard tracks from it, that goes into depth on the actual sessions and kind of shows that Keith and Brian Jones were the ones who really came up with all of the musical ideas of the album. But the album does have some classics on here too. She's a Rainbow is a classic. 2,000 Light Years from Home is a classic. So I've liked this album ever since I heard it, and I can't really knock the album. You know, it's a different album. It's not a Pepper ripoff, but Pepper was so overwhelming at the time that I think anything the Stones did, critics would have said is a Pepper ripoff. But anyways, I jokingly thought this wasn't gonna. I jokingly said something about this coming out, and we have an anniversary edition of their Satanic Majesties Request. A great way to use store credit if you have any store credit at any of the places that you shop. I didn't spend a dime on it. I had store credit at Zia's Records.